Welcome to Real Paranormal Activity, the network. Entertainment you'll enjoy.
You are listening to an RPA production, where people gather. LaFosse Corporation, LLC.
The world is full of mysteries. It's full of strangeness. And it exists with oddities. That's what we do on this show. We examine the strangeness, the mysterious, the oddities. This is Terry's Mysterious Moments, and I am your presenter, Terry from Texas. This is Season 8. Welcome if it's your first time. Welcome back if you've been here before. Go with us on this trip while we look at cryptids like Bigfoot, the Yeti, the Loch Ness Monster, and maybe even Thunderbirds. Be with us while we examine stories of legends such as werewolves, vampires, witches, ghosts, and hauntings. Thank you for being here. Enjoy the show. Greetings, my Mysterians. This is Terry from Texas with another episode of Terry's Mysterious Moment. I want to go back in time a little ways to Scotland between 1500 and 1600. Alexander Sawney Bean is a legendary figure said to have been the head of the 45-member clan in Scotland in the 16th century that murdered and cannibalized over 1,000 people in 25 years. According to the legend, Bean and his clan members were eventually caught by a search party sent by King James VI, and were executed for their heinous crimes. The story appeared in the Newgate Calendar, a sensationalized crime catalog loosely connected with Newgate Prison in London. It has since passed into folklore and become part of the Edinburgh tourism circuit. According to the Newgate Calendar, Alexander Bean was born in East Lothian during the 16th century. His father was a ditch digger and hedge trimmer. Bean tried to take up the family trade, but quickly realized that he was not fit for this work. He left home with an allegedly vicious woman named Black Agnes Douglas, who apparently shared his inclinations and was accused of being a witch. After some robbing and the cannibalization of one of their victims, the couple took up residence in a coastal cave in Benane Head between Girvan and Ballantrae. The cave was 200 yards deep, and the entrance was blocked by water during high tide, which enabled the couple to live there undiscovered for some 25 years. The pair produced 6 daughters, 8 sons, 14 granddaughters, and 18 grandsons. The grandchildren were said to be the products of incest between their children. It kind of figures because anybody they brought into the cave they ate. Lacking the inclination for regular work, the Bean clan thrived on laying careful ambushes at night to rob and murder individuals or small groups. They brought the bodies back to their cave where the corpses were dismembered and eaten. They would pickle the leftovers and the discarded body parts in barrels, and these leftovers would sometimes wash up on nearby beaches. The strategy helped conceal their crimes by leading villagers to believe that animals were responsible for the attacks on travelers. The body parts and disappearances did not go unnoticed. but the clan stayed in their cave by day and took their victims at night. Thus, the villagers remained for a time unaware of the murderers who lived nearby. Once local people began to take notice of the murders, once local people began to take notice of the disappearances, searches were launched to find the culprits. One such local took note of the cave, but the searchers did not believe any human could live in it. Frustrated and desperate for justice, the townspeople hanged several innocents. Yeah, that happens. But the disappearances continued. Suspicion fell on local innkeepers, since, in many cases, they were the last known to have seen the missing people alive. Again, that's kind of the law of averages. You're an innkeeper and somebody stays at your inn and they disappear the next day. They look at you and say, "Did you do it?" One night, the Bean clan ambushed a married couple riding from a fair on one horse. The man, trained in combat and armed with sword and pistol, was able to hold the clan off. The unfortunate wife was unhorsed, fell to the ground, and was captured, meeting a hideous fate. The husband was rescued when a large group of fairgoers appeared on the trail and the Beans fled. He was taken to the local magistrate, who was then informed of the events. Well, with the Beans' existence revealed, it wasn't long before the king, perhaps James VI of Scotland, heard of the atrocities and led a posse of 400 men and several bloodhounds. The bloodhounds soon led them to the previously overlooked cave. Upon entering by torchlight, the searchers found the Bean clan surrounded by human remains, body parts hanging from the walls, barrels filled with limbs, and piles of stolen heirlooms and jewelry. Kind of makes the Texas Chainsaw Massacre look weak. There are two versions of the events following the Bean clan's discovery. The more common is that the clan was captured alive, having given up without a fight. They were taken in chains to the toll booth jail in Edinburgh, then transferred to either Leith or Glasgow, where they were summarily executed, being regarded as subhuman and unfit for trial. Sawney and the other men were cut up and thrown into the fires. Their hands and feet were severed, and they were allowed to bleed to death. Sawney shouted his dying words, "It isn't over. It will never be over." After watching the men die, Agnes, the other women, and the children were tied to stakes and burned alive. These punishments recall in essence, if not in detail, the medieval hanging, drawing, and quartering decreed for men convicted of treason. Women convicted of the same would be burned. The second version is that the search party detonated gunpowder in the entrance of the cave, leaving the Bean clan to suffocate. That's not really proven, though. The town of Girvan, located near the macabre scene of murder and debauchery, has another legend about the Bean clan. It says that one of Bean's daughters eventually left the clan and settled in Girvan, where she planted a tree that became known as the Hairy Tree. After her family's capture and exposure, her identity was revealed and angry locals hanged her from a bough of the Hairy Tree. According to the Scotsman, there is a debate over the validity of the Sawney Bean tale. Some assert that Sawney Bean was a real person, while others consider him a mythical feature. Dorothy Sayers offered a gruesome account of the tale in the anthology of Great Stories of Detection, Mystery, and Horror, written in 1928. The book was a bestseller in Britain and was reprinted several times in the next 5 years. In a 2005 article, Sean Thomas notes that historical documents such as newspapers and diaries during the era which Sawney Bean was supposedly active make no mention of ongoing disappearances of hundreds of people. Additionally, he notes inconsistencies in the stories, but speculates that kernels of truth might have inspired the legend. There are contradicting beliefs as to whether the alleged atrocities occurred. Thomas explains that while many believe Sawney Bean's campaign took place during the 16th century, others place it centuries earlier. Thomas also believes that it's likely that the legend was embellished and altered over time to make it more relevant to readers and more salacious. The Sawney Bean legend closely resembles the story of Christy Cleek, which is attested from the early 15th century. Christy Cleek is a mythical Scottish cannibal said to have lived during a famine in the mid-14th century. The legend of the Sawney Bean first appeared in British chapbooks, which is a type of street literature. Many today argue that the story served as political propaganda to denigrate the Scots after the Jacobite rebellions. Thomas disagrees, arguing that if the Sawney Bean story is to be read as deliberately anti-Scottish, how do we explain the equal emphasis on English criminals in the same publications? Wouldn't such an approach rather blunt the point? Maybe. A roadside from circa 1750 mentions the Scottish traditional story of Sandy Bain, which is how sometimes they pronounced his name, as it relates to a report of a murderer who had been eating live cats. Another cannibal story from Scotland, and even more redolent of the Sawney Bean tale than the Christy Cleek story, can be found in the 1696 work of Nathaniel Crouch, a compiler and popular history writer who published under the pseudonym of Richard Burton. He tells the following tale, which happened in 1459, the year before the death of James II of Scotland. Quoting, "About which time a certain thief, who lived privately in a den with his wife and children, were all burned alive, they having made it their practice for many years to kill young people and eat them. One girl only of a year old was saved and brought up at Dundee, who at 12 years of age, being found guilty of the same horrid crime, was condemned to the same punishment. And when the people followed her in great multitudes to execution, wondering at her unnatural villainy, she turned toward them and with a cruel countenance said, 'What do you thus rail at me, as if I had done such a heinous act, contrary to the nature of all men? I tell you that if you did but know how pleasant the taste of man's flesh was, none of you would forbear to eat it.' Impenitent and stubborn mind, she suffered deserved death." Unquote. Hector Boach notes that the infant daughter of a Scottish brigand, who was executed with his family for cannibalism, though raised by foster parents, developed the cannibal appetite at 12 and was put to death for it. This was summarized by George M. Gould and Walter Pyle in Anomalies and Curiosities in Medicine. The Sawney Bean legend has been used in popular culture over and over. Apparently, Wes Craven, the American filmmaker, used the Sawney Bean story as the inspiration for the movie that he made called The Hills Have Eyes. Harlan Ellison wrote a story called She's a Young Thing and Cannot Leave Her Mother. Tells a story of a drifter who meets descendants of the Sawney Bean clan. There was a novel written called The Ballad of Sawney Bean, published in 1990 by Harry Tate. It was kind of a historiograph, metafiction retelling of the tale of Sawney Bean. Of course, nobody can keep the truth. And it did win the Saltire Society's award for Scottish First Book of the Year. The novel Off Season by the late horror novelist Jack Ketchum was inspired by the Sawney Bean tale. In the children's book The Day I Swapped My Dad for Two Goldfish by Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean, the two goldfish are named Sawney and Beanie. That's really good for kids. The Sawney Bean story is something that I read years ago, and it stuck in my mind, not because I have any interest in cannibalism or murder or incest. It's just kind of a weird story to hang around. And it's interesting that they were able to do this, according to legend, for 25 years. And it's just, group after group of children being raised in that kind of situation and then carrying on. It's like, with that many people in the cave, they had to learn how to feed them somehow. And I'm not suggesting that this is a great way of doing it under any circumstances. Anyway, that's the story of Sawney Bean and his clan. Let me know if you're interested in it. I mean, it is a weird story, and it's one I found interesting enough to tell. That's all I have for this week. This is Terry from Texas saying Merry Christmas, because I hope this comes out about Christmas time. And if not, Happy New Year. So be careful, have fun, enjoy the week and a half of holidays, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye.